So this is a Baroque guitar. It's an instrument of the plucked string family that was developing alongside the lute and the Theorbo throughout the Renaissance and Baroque period in Europe. This particular instrument, the 5-course version, a course is a different set or pair of string. They can be as an octave or just in unison. So octave or unison. This instrument is an evolution of the 4-course Renaissance guitar. So they added this extra 5th course, and it eventually became a very, very popular instrument in the 17th century. It's first mentioned towards the latter end of the 16th century, and throughout the 17th century it sees a big development in its accompaniment roles as both a continuo instrument but also as a really lovely solo instrument in domestic settings. The Baroque guitar is obviously a very, very pretty instrument. So we got this absolutely amazing parchment, sort of hand-cut bit of russet, which they are multi-level, they're sort of 3D russets. It doesn't have any function for the sound. If anything, it probably blocks it a little bit, but that just shows the commitment to pretty craftsmanship. It also got these lovely whiskers, which are very typical of Baroque guitars at the time. And then also, nice bit of construction here is this curved back. That was a bit of an Italian specialty for Baroque guitars. You also get flat ones, the French ones. These ones have a slightly warmer, sort of more enveloping sound, whereas the flat ones, I find them a little bit more direct in their sort of attack, which is a very desirable feature as well. Good things to have both of them. So it's both a strumming instrument, that's sort of its original function as the Spanish guitar. It was created in Spain, as well as a punteado style or plucked style. So the strumming style and the punteado. The punteado style is obviously very mellow, it's absolutely lovely, and it's much more reminiscent of lute music of the time, whilst the strumming style is very much the absolute identity of this instrument. The Baroque guitar is strung in a way that might be familiar to modern guitar players, but it has a few differences which actually put it closer to the ukulele, for instance. So the strings are an E, B, G, D, and A. So it's the same notes, the same 5 top notes of classical or any guitar. The difference is that when we come to the 4th course or the 4th string, the D, we have an octave and the lower octave, and then the A, both strings are just up the octave. The Baroque guitar, therefore, doesn't have that much of a bass register, which can create some very useful advantages when accompanying, as we don't have to commit so much to the bass line. We can just very much focus on the middle part of the sandwich, so we can just harmonize. So another great advantage is that gives us an ability to play in Campanela style, and that is similar to the Theorbo actually, and the ukulele. And that means that we can play scales in a different kind of way to other instruments. So for instance, just this little bit of a scale. You know, that's going across 2 strings, has a little bit of a string cross, you know, not the most resonant bit of the instrument. But on the Baroque guitar, with our special stringing, so knowing that I have a high D there, which is exactly the same as that one, I can do some much nicer and faster scales, which are actually quite easy and they sound great. So that's one of the big advantages of the instrument. We got the absolute basic, which is just up and down. But then we can do some extra accents, and that just sort of adds a little bit of rhythmic interest to your accompanying, which is really nice. One original technique from the Baroque period is the battuto. You go down with your middle finger, down with your thumb, and then up with your index finger and up with your middle finger. And that immediately has some sort of syncopation and kind of evenness to the sound that is rather lovely. Another version of the battuto, which just goes really fast. I get rid of the middle finger, but I do the same. And that's a great way of ending pieces usually, and also for slightly more epic strumming patterns. Another one that I quite enjoy is the abanico. Any flamenco fans will identify this one. That's a great one. And other way that I really like to do triplets, for instance, is up with the thumb and then so guitars, we know, were very much present in domestic music making, especially in Spain. One of the earlier mentions is the Alonso de Mudarra books, which have some sections for four-course Renaissance guitar. This repertoire of songs with guitar very much develops throughout the Renaissance and the Baroque. And we eventually get to this slightly odd branch of sort of pop lead sheets called alphabeto notation. And as I just said, it's basically a pop or a jazz lead sheet. So we only have the text, so the poem to be sung, and just the chords indicated by symbols or characters. And the letter doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the actual chord name. So for instance, the letter D is a chord of A minor, and that can be very confusing. But if you just spend a little bit of time with the system, it eventually just sort of makes sense. So back to these alphabeto guitar songs, interestingly, they didn't have a tune written out for them. So we know that probably these tunes were very much in the common parlance of the people, and they would have just known them. So tunes like Sarabands, Pasacales, Danza de las Hachas, Villano, these are all popular tunes that make it to alphabeto books, and we just get some chords with the poem. Another way of playing the guitar is a more traditional continue approach from the bass line. This was very commonly done in music by Lully, for instance, the dance music, and also in England, the bug had very much caught on, like Purcell, who even indicates in Dido and Aeneas the guitar's chaconne. Another place where it was used would have been in opera, such as Monteverdi's. So an instance of continue on guitar, this is one of my personal favorites, is the hornpipe from Purcell's Fairy Queen. We have a bass line, that looks very much like Baroque music. And from that, I can just do the chords. So I can do a very simple version. Or one where I'll put a little bit of triplets in. So you can choose. Or then another really good old trick is the old don't play the first bit of the bar and then it sounds like a great syncopation, just whack at the thing. Another instance of Baroque guitar playing, this one will be a slightly more lovely, mellow one. This is Vous me prie chaque jour by Michel Lambert. As well as strumming, you can bring a little bit of extra French refinement to it, which is useful in this case. So. The Baroque guitar also developed really great and not often heard in the concert platform solo repertoire. So from Spain, we heard at the beginning of the video Santiago de Murcia's Cumbes. From France, we have composers such as Francesco Corbetta and Roberto de Bizet, who also wrote for Theorbo. This is a little bit of a chaconne by Corbetta, and it really demonstrates this sort of combination of the strumming techniques of the guitar with the plucking, and it just has some great sort of harmony that is so idiomatic to the instrument. There's not very many printed sources of Baroque guitar solo music in England, but we do have a very interesting manuscript, which is Princess Anne's manuscript. This is the Princess Anne, daughter of Charles II, and very much famously later portrayed by Olivia Colman in The Favourite. She was a great Baroque guitar player in her youth, and an accomplished one. She was in fact taught by Francesco Corbetta, who we've just mentioned. And in her book, she collects all sorts of really interesting music. So some theater music, some bits from Fairy Queen, there's also some bits from Callisto, as well as dances by Corbetta in the French style. But she also collects a lot of Scottish folk music. This is an example of it. These guitars also traveled all the way to Latin America, where they became the basis of a lot of the instruments that we know today from the Latin American folk tradition. So tiples, jarana huasteca, and jarana jarocha, especially is some of the closest similarities. The jarana is remarkable. That is double strung. It has a very similar shape, 5 courses. The tuning has changed. But some jarocho experts very firmly believe that the jarana is an absolute descendant of the Baroque guitar. And it's an instrument that is still very commonly used in Mexico today. Also the charango, very likely to have been a descendant from these instruments. And again, it sort of connects us a little bit with some of those strumming patterns, which I very much can hear in the cueca from Chile today, that's made famous by Violeta and Isabel Parra and lots of these amazing folklorist musicians.